Hello and welcome to another lighting diagram. My name is Trenton Hoshiko, and today we're talking about this painting, which is A Criminal Case by Honore Daumier. You might recognize that name from a lighting diagram that I did a while back, The Print Collector, and I think it's interesting if you put these two side by side. I think there are stylistic elements that you can identify, are common between them, which is just always something that's really fun for me. And the cool thing about this one is that it's a sort of simple setup where you can get this type of look with not a huge amount of equipment, and there's some different budget levels you can use to really enhance the look of it. Before we get started, I want to say that I have these filmmaker template tools right here at the top of the screen. You can go to my Patreon, patreon.com/Trenton Hoshiko, to grab those. They are free. The template itself is linked down in the video's description. You can go there and you can get these tools. The tools are for Draw.io, which is a free and open source diagramming software. Let's talk about this painting. The big thing for me here is that there is this really awesome line at the back of the room that they're in where you can see the light kind of curve and fall away. I'm just going to use a circle here to kind of show that shape, but it is vaguely like this. Now that shadow is not actually really that hard, but it is a bit of a spotlight look, which focuses our attention right here on these two guys in the center, and you get a little bit on the guy at the back, who I assume is a guard at this, uh, legal facility, courthouse. I think that's what they're called. I want to really focus on getting that look with that line right there. I'm not going to focus too much on the people back here. If you were actually going to recreate this painting, obviously you would need to do that. But for them, I think that the general ambient lighting that we're going to talk about would maybe give us enough exposure on them. But that's not really my focus. I really want to recreate this look right here in particular and get these shadows. And something that stands out to me is that this shadow is quite dark. You still see a little bit into it, but it's quite dark. But this shadow right here that he makes on the wooden, like witness stand or whatever this is not actually fully blacked out. The face shadows, there is a lot of contrast left to right on the face, but they create all these little lines and grooves. And I think that's something that really drew me to this painting, is that there's a lot of those kinds of harsh details. This is not a very glamorous portrait. And so we want to gather those while also understanding that the light back here doesn't have a hard shadow. The light right here against, creating this shadow isn't that hard either. And so I want to be cognizant of that when we're choosing our light source and how we're working with the light. I think that's going to be very important for us. But at the same time, I don't want to skimp on these really great shadows along the face here. At the same time, they're not completely blacked out, so we do want to have enough ambient light to fill those in just a tiny bit. The positioning here and the actual like blocking of the scene is really cool. I think it's a very kinetic. You can see him kind of leaning back and whispering, and this guy's leaning forward really intensely. His eyes are kind of bulging. We want to be able to see the eyes as best as possible. Obviously, if this was in motion, people would be moving around, they'd be blinking, they'd be, not exactly in this position. But there's something about this where the kinetic, almost like panicked nature of the guy here really sticks out to me. And I think that that kind of feeling and nature is really complemented by this spotlight look without it being just a spotlight. So how do we get a spotlight look without it being just a spotlight? That's the question that we're kind of working with today. Okay, so to start off, I'm going to use the floor plan tool as usual to make my room. Now, the room here could have a couple different kind of aspects to it. I can't tell if these people are a little bit lower, but I don't think they are. I think everything is on the same level of floor here, the people in the background and where the lawyer looking guy is standing. I think the difference is that this defendant box type look of whatever this is right here, I think is raised up, obviously because he's taller. And then I think this guy might be even further up than him. But we don't need those details exactly, and you could always cheat those types of things in real life. So I'm going to make just a wall that goes like this behind. Okay, so this is kind of what we're looking at here. I don't know the exact sizes of these things, and I'm not actually familiar with how French courts are set up. So it's kind of a guess from how the painting looks, and I think that's generally fine. But then we're going to also have the guard in the background as well. So this guy's right here. I'm going to put him like this, if that makes any sense. And we're just going to be able to see this guy just a little bit in the very back. And then we need our lawyer right here. And if you'll notice, the lawyer is actually blocking the end of the box. I don't know where it exactly ends on him. So now with our actors placed, let's talk about what kind of light we want for this. We want something that's spherical. And now saying that out loud, that Drake and Josh clip always plays through my head. But the spherical nature of the light right here means that we are going to need something that creates a spherical look. That's why we think of this as like a spotlight look. But at the same time, it's not as hard as a spotlight by far. If it was a spotlight, usually this would be a pretty much perfectly hard line because of how spotlights work, and you wouldn't be getting any of this kind of feathering right here. That feathering is very important to me. And even lines right here would be way harder than they are, and you wouldn't have as much kind of ambient nature as well. So I'm going to actually say we could use a large softbox for this. Specifically something like the 37-inch Godot Octabox that I've talked about on the channel before, but you could go even bigger actually as well. But I'm going to put that back here. Now, I'm almost putting it straight on. The camera itself is somewhere kind of like this. It's off at this like 30 to 35-ish degree angle. We are not parallel to the box, and I assume the box is parallel to the wall. We're not parallel to either of those, but we're not completely perpendicular, and we're not at 45 degrees. They do extend off in the distance towards the left of our frame. I'd say that we're kind of moved back, and usually with paintings, I do put them towards the 50 millimeter range. You could go a little wider or a little tighter if you wanted to. So I would probably shoot this at, probably a 50 to 70. Okay, so now let's actually talk about this light. We want to use the Octabox because we're going to want that circular nature to it. You could do something with a Fresnel. That was my kind of original inclination here. But we're going to talk about a couple of different options over the next few minutes. So with the Octabox, let's talk about how that light is going to affect our subjects. When you're having it like this, we can see around the edge of the book here, and we know that the light is not landing on the right side, or at least the right side of the frame for us for this book, and it's casting a shadow that goes towards the right of frame. So when I put this lamp in here, it, I kind of defaulted to it being straight on because the shadows are not extremely, pushed to one side in particular, but they are pushed a little bit. So I'm going to just gently rotate this light somewhere like this. So that's basically 10 degrees off of straight. Now, part of the point of me doing this with an Octabox is I want this light to spread because I want to get all the way behind them on the wall, and you can see where that would be falling off right about here, just outside of the box itself right there. And we don't see the light fall off on the right side. We don't see the entirety of the table or bench or whatever this is right here. So I don't care about that right corner, really. It's fine for that to not have the light on it in particular. But yeah, this is where I would place my Octabox. And just, yeah, pointing it to the right slightly, but still almost straight on. And that should achieve the shadow look that we have here by the books. In addition to allowing us to get the left side of this guy's face, on our camera right, actually in shadow, with enough peeking around his nose to give us a Rembrandt triangle, but otherwise that's relatively dark. And then the darkest part of our shadow being on the left arm, still camera right, of our lawyer right here, where there is no light between his shoulder and the actual defendant box, whatever this is. The shadow, though, that falls from him onto the defendant box does have some lightness to it, though. So I don't think that this is the only source in the room, and this is what I was kind of talking about with it not being just a spotlight. With the Octabox, that light will wrap a little bit more because we are scattering those light particles, but I don't think that's going to be enough to lighten that up. So we have a couple different options here But I think the way to do this most professionally would be to use some space lights. One right in front of them and one right above that defendant box behind his shoulders. So we don't want as much of the light falling onto his shoulders, but we do want to make sure that we get proper exposure. And then this will help us get exposure on the guy in the back as well. This one at the front will help us lighten the shadow right here along the left side of his face, our camera right, and we'll make sure that we are seeing into the shadow on the actual lawyer's face as well. We do want to get those eyes. One way that you can cheat this also, and I haven't talked about that much in these videos, is you could take a bounce card and put it below him to get some light off the ground back up into his eyes. Because we do want the light falling off, but we also understand that there's people back here, we could also have some other space lights placed somewhere like this. Now, if you're in a studio environment, this might just already be part of the grid itself. That would be a lot easier to shoot something like this with those kinds of space lights already in place. But the octobox here is still our key, and we are getting our exposure on our guy. We are getting that shadow on his hand. We're going to get the shadow behind him and the shadow on the face, as well as the shadow on the books. And because of how that light works and how we're kind of focusing the light with that circular nature to it, we are keeping our focus on these two right in the center as the brightest points. The face of this guy and the faces of these people are not nearly as bright as this center area right here. Now, if you want to have a little more darkness to the face, come back in just a little bit more control over that. I would take a wag flag, a 4x4, or a flag, and you could go like this and put these back here to bring out the shadow on his face, and right here to bring out the shadow on his face, and right here, as well as when he turns and looks, his face. Those just help make sure that we're not getting too much light bouncing off of these light colored walls, coming back in, just some negative fill to help control those shadows in the down aspect rather than the up aspect, which is what we usually talk about. This is a more complex setup right here. So let's talk about if we wanted to do this on a little bit lower of a budget. So the first thing that you could do is replace those space lights with just actual large diffusion silks. If you don't have to have the time or labor to do all the rigging for those on the ceiling or on menace arms or something like that, you could have a diffusion sheet right here with a lamp. And the bigger the better, so that you get it to be just this very neutral, even light that's not super bright. You could do something like this. And for these ones, I would just take it and put it to the right side of the camera to control how filled in these shadows are on their faces. You don't need it to be an incredible amount, but you want it to be enough. I would really keep this as an octobox because that gives you a balance between control of your light and making that spherical shape, as well as actually taking that light and diffusing it a little bit so that it's not quite as harsh, while still allowing us to have these shadows. You could always take the inner diffuser out of that just so that it's a tiny bit harder. As well, you can move it forwards or backwards to also control how hard those shadows are. Kind of depends on the power of your lamp, though, to do that. And these diffusion sheets could be anything from actual 4x4 diffusion silks to other types of diffusion material. They could be the inner parts of 5-in-1 reflectors. And if you could entertain more darkness on the right of frame on their faces, just to help you save some money, you could take away this diffusion fill right here. And to balance that and make it not super dark, take away these as well. So that really your light is just coming from the left side of frame, and then hopefully bouncing off some of these walls. You could at that point also take a bounce card and make sure some of that's bounced back in to the sides of their faces, but it would still be primarily shadowed because of the light coming from our key of this octobox. And if you don't have an octobox, you could use a lamp with a hood and a diffusion sock to actually get a look that's kind of similar to this. What that would lose you is the actual size of your source, so things would definitely be harder. You wouldn't probably get as much of a nice gradient on this back wall here, but you would have harder shadows like right here on the book, on their faces, those kinds of things. But the diffusion sock would serve the purpose of reducing the double shadow effect as well as softening those lines just a little bit. This one is obviously the cheapest one because you're using just the lamp and diffusion to get exposure on the left side of the frame, the bounce to reflect light back and fill in their faces, the bounce on the floor to fill kind of underneath the chin just a little bit, and the lamp with the hood and the diffusion sock. So this one is our lowest budget option, this one being our middle budget option with more diffusion and the octobox and the wag flags. And so like the main difference between this one and this one, besides the cost, is that you're not using negative fill to make sure those shadows are dark while also using diffusion to wrap the light around just a little bit. Here, you're using bounce to make sure those shadows aren't too dark, but you don't have more control of them in particular because you're not also using the negative fill, and you don't have the assistance from the actual octobox helping wrap that light around just even a little bit. Here, you have that light wrapping around a little bit. You are able to control how much fill there is coming into those shadows, and you're able to control those shadows a little bit more by making sure that there's less light reflecting from this corner and on the walls and those kinds of things. You are also controlling for the other part of the audience over here on the left side of frame by having your diffusion near lamp. I mean, honestly, if you don't need that part, you could cut that off here, but I would be hesitant to do that because having that image have more depth in your scene and being able to see what's in the background is to me quite important. And here is our most professional version that uses space lights above the talent and the scene to give an ambient look. And then you can even make this one a little brighter and this one a little dimmer, or have various controls of those. Still using the octobox over here to make sure that we are getting that spherical shape. And so this is not actually an incredibly complex setup, especially if you go for the lowest budget one. Although for my shoots, I would probably aim for something like this if it was at all possible. If it was between these two, I probably would actually cut the diffusion and then use those flags to bring those shadows down even deeper and just stylize it a little bit more, or just fully go for bringing this bounce closer and making it a little bit less. It kind of really also depends on the scene. If this is your like romantic comedy where they've been arrested because they were skating on the wrong, lake or whatever in the cutesy town that they've gone to from New York over Christmas vacation, um, you probably wouldn't want to have this kind of harsher setup where you're getting these harsher shadows because of these wag flags pulling the shadows down. You just simply wouldn't need it. So, it depends on what kind of scene you're going for. For me, this is quite dramatic. He looks shocked, even maybe a little bit horrified about like the verdict or what's happening. He's probably not happy with his lawyer. The lawyer doesn't look pleased. There's this very stoic guard at the back and a sizable seeming audience for whatever is going on here. So this seems quite dramatic for me. So that's why I'm having an emphasis in particular on making sure these shadows actually work and show up while not being too dark. Because I think what Mr. Daumier does here that's really important to me is that we can still see into them. So we have also some contrast options, and that can be a difference in how you actually grade this as well. Something that's kind of interesting to me is that there's actually like 4 tones in this. There is tan, blue, black, and I mean, it's not even actually white, it's mostly tan. So it's like black, blue, and tan for this entire scene. And so when we're talking about these lighting diagrams and we're talking about recreations and inspirations, there's so many different sources that we can pull from. We can look at the color palette of this. We can look at how those shadows are falling and how then the color palette and those shadows actually interact with each other. Because if we had a full spectrum color here, then we might have a really bright point on his neck right here, and these might be actually darker. But by balancing how those colors work, we're able to still, once again, focus our eye on the main subject of this scene, which is whatever is being said between these two people in this exact moment. So that was a pretty fun one that I've been actually really excited to do for a long time. I really like this painting. There's something so dramatic about it. And yeah, these are 3 different ways that you could think about lighting a scene that's similar to this painting. If you like these kinds of videos, you can press that like button down there. That really helps me in reaching new people who also really like these kinds of lighting and cinematography type topics, especially with that micro budget perspective. If you want to see more of my videos, you can subscribe for way more of the lighting diagrams as well as my cinematography videos. I have some really cool DIY builds coming up. If you want to be able to see those, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Like I said at the beginning, if you want the filmmaker template tools that I've been using here at the top of the screen, that is also linked down in the video's description, along with some guide videos that I've made for how to actually get started using Dryo to make your own lighting diagrams. Whether you're making them for your movie that you're working on, or you're breaking down movie stills, or you're just trying to learn and think about lighting, I think making diagrams is a really great way to grow your skills with actually planning and executing your lighting, especially if you need to work with and communicate with a team. If you want to join my Patreon while you're over there, I would really appreciate it. I'm trying to get up to like 100 members in the next couple months between both the free and paid tiers. If you want to join as a paid person, you get to vote on upcoming video topics for lighting diagrams and cinematography videos in general. You get to watch ad-free, and there's some other infrequent goodies that I also put in there. If you want to get the kinds of equipment we've been talking about today, I have affiliate links down in the video's description that help support this channel as well at no extra cost to you. This week, if you're offered the opportunity to be kind to somebody, please take it. You never know how much it's going to mean to you and to them as well. There's a lot of stuff going on right now, and just offering a little bit more kindness to the world is one of the things that we can all do to help each other out. Wear a mask in public to help stop the spread of communicable illnesses, and try to find some art that you love, be it a movie, a book, a painting, something that just really brings you a feeling of creativity and inspiration. Make sure to spend some time doing that every week. It's super important, everybody. So thank you so much. As always, I hope you have a wonderful week ahead of you.